Today, we're joined by over 1,400 business leaders, faith leaders, labor leaders, and immigration advocate leaders. We thank our co-sponsors, the United States Chamber of Commerce, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, the Immigration Hub, National Immigration Law Center, Unite Here, CHIRLA, NYIC, SEIU, and CASA. Federal immigration reform will help our country rebuild and recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Senator Menendez, I am a graduate of Milburn High School, Essex County. You and Congressman Luis Gutiérrez stopped my mother's deportations. She became a U.S. citizen after 23 years in this country. She voted in her first presidential election last November. My ma was a doctor in China. Today, she works at a laboratory that treats COVID-19 patients. This is what immigrants do. We get the job done. Undocumented immigrants are on the front lines fighting this pandemic. Over 70% work in an essential sector, caring for the sick, the elderly, picks crops, processes meat. A majority of them have lived here for decades. Earlier today, it was reported that 900,000 American citizens filed for unemployment. Legalizing undocumented supports these American citizens. It boosts the economy's GDP by $1.5 trillion, increased the wage floor for American workers, and supports 750,000 to 900,000 American jobs. Americans know this. Fox News poll on election day found that 70% of Americans, 91% of Biden voters, over half of Trump voters support legal status. Americans across the board want and support immigration solutions, not gridlock and political games. With that, I am delighted to introduce a justice warrior, co-chair and co-founder of ABIC, Mr. John Rowe, Chairman Emeritus of Exelon Corporation. Mr. Rowe.
Thank you, Becca. Senator Menendez, thank you for being here. Luis, you have always been here on this issue. Thank you for being here again. It's a joy to work with you again. You know, Luis is one of those rare radicals who's kind to utilities, so some of us think very highly of him. The American Business Immigration Coalition is a very broad-based bipartisan group of for-profit companies, not-for-profit institutions like hospitals and universities, citizens action organizations, so on and so forth. We're not very exclusive at all. We range from people who would call themselves very liberal to those of us who call themselves conservative. As one of our more conservative members, it will be my task in the next few months to try to get as many Republicans as I can, which may be 1 or 2 or 10 or 20, to support most or all of the president's bill. We at ABIC have looked at his executive orders. We have looked at the draft materials we've seen on the bill. And the best thing to say is we are deeply grateful. This is really good stuff. It's good for the economy. It's morally good, and it just works. As a conservative, I've never understood why it's conservative to tell people they can't work and pay taxes, but that's my opinion. Jean and I, my wife, have worked with a lot of undocumented people in charter schools. They're good people, they're good Americans, they're good students, and we want to see them have a good life and help make this country what it can be. So we're very grateful to President Biden, to you, Senator Menendez, always to Luis for what he's doing. And now our Democratic members, our Republican members, and our completely confused members will do everything we can to help get this immigration reform package done. And I see popping up on my screen Josh Hoyt, who is my liberal alter ego. And I think he's going to introduce Luis next. Is that right, Becca?
That's right.
That's right. So I don't know if you were introducing me as one of your liberal friends or one of your confused friends, but I'm definitely on the liberal side. John and I began this together with Sam Scott, Raul Raimundo, Bill Kunkler, Carol Siegel, and many others. And when we did that, we understood that you need people from both parties, but you also need people who will champion immigrants before they champion party. That's one of the reasons that we always have worked very closely with Congressman Gutierrez.
What do we think, 2-3 weeks before we actually introduce?
He traveled the nation.
Depends on legislative council and.
You have to put yourself on mute. He traveled the nation. He negotiated in good faith with Republicans. He went and got himself arrested multiple times in front of the White House and Congress when they were run by both Democrats and Republicans to protest deportations. So we know that Congressman Gutierrez has always championed legalization for the 11 million. And we're happy that he has now joined the American Business Immigration Coalition as a member of our steering committee. Congressman Gutierrez, please take it away. He will be introducing Senator Bob Menendez, the lead Senate sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. And thank you, John Rowe, for being a friend and an advocate in very, very critical moments. And Josh, for our many years of friendship. Look, my task this morning is very simple. And that is to introduce to you the person who I believe and I know is going to be the champion that immigrants so desperately need today in the Senate. Someone who has always shown me that he will put the interest of people, that he will put the interest of immigrants ahead of party loyalty. That has not always been the case. I have seen him in the room with President Barack Obama. I've seen him in the room with leadership of the Democratic Party. And I have seen how he stands up many times as the sole and only voice, defending the integrity of our immigrant justice movement. And after 4 years of what can only be described as absolute terror on our immigrant community, it is such an honor for me and such a privilege to introduce the man who will be the chief sponsor of our comprehensive immigration reform legislation. Anybody who knows Senator Menendez, anybody who knows Bob, knows how much he loves his mom, how much he cherishes the fact that she brought him to the United States of America, to freedom, how he grew up poor in tenements and rose to be today the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Senate of the United States of America. But the most important thing I want to convey to everybody is that he knows how to lead with principle, and he knows how to lead us to victory. Principle and leadership to victory is what I know Senator Bob Menendez will bring us, because I've seen him do it in the past. When others recoiled and hid, he came forward and spoke. And so I leave with all of you a senator that is a true public servant and a true justice warrior for our immigrant community. And I say today, he will bring the tens of millions of undocumented workers out of the darkness and into the light of day and into freedom and justice. With you, Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey.
Well, thank you, my dear friend, Congressman Luis Gutiérrez. Let me thank the American Business Immigration Coalition for bringing us all together. Rebecca, thank you for your leadership. Mr. Rowe, thank you for your principled leadership. We will need it in this fight. And let me just say a word before I proceed to talk about the legislation, about my dear friend, Luis Gutiérrez. You know, when we were in these battles for immigration reform in the past, we would go to national meetings of various groups. And I never forget once in one of those meetings, one of the women yelled out, "Gutierrez, Moises, the Moses of immigration reform." For those of you who know the biblical story of Moses, he led his people through the desert, ultimately to the promised land, but he didn't get to see the promised land himself because God was angry with him about something, so he didn't give him the final opportunity to see the promised land. Joshua his disciple, ultimately led the Israelites into the promised land. And so my dear friend, who has been the Moses of immigration reform, has handed off this task to me, and I intend to be the Joshua that gets us all to the promised land. It's a new day in America. Los últimos 4 años han sido una pesadilla para los inmigrantes y sus familias. Esa pesadilla se termina hoy. The Biden-Harris administration, I believe, will get our government back into the business of solving problems instead of creating them. Our last president, unfortunately, took an opposite approach. From my perspective, he squandered billions on a futile border wall instead of addressing the root causes of migration. He tried to shut down DACA and NTPS for hundreds of thousands of people instead of recognizing their contributions to this country. And he instituted cruel policies that tore families apart instead of bringing people out of the shadows. Time to turn the page. Es hora de comenzar un nuevo capítulo. As a son of Cuban immigrants and the most senior Latino in the United States Congress, and someone who has spent years fighting for immigration reform, it means so much to all of us to have a new president propose bold and visionary immigration reform on day 1, not day 2, not day 3, not a year later, on day 1. As I prepare to introduce the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021 in the Senate, I know that President Biden and Vice President Harris are going to be strong partners. They want to get it done, and we will get it done. Let me walk you through the legislation first. First and foremost, this legislation aims to bring 11 million people out of the shadows and onto a pathway of citizenship. Undocumented immigrants who pass criminal background and national security checks and pay their taxes will be able to apply for a new 6-year lawful prospective immigrant, or what we call LPI status. Lawful prospective immigrants will be authorized to work, to join the military, to travel, to live without the fear of deportation. And this will encompass both their spouses and their children, which means that from day 1, when you register with the government and you pass these essential elements of background, you have a temporary protective status, a lawful prospective immigrant status. After 5 years, they can apply for lawful permanent residency, or what most of us know as green cards. And dreamers, present TPS holders, and farm workers who meet specific criteria, they'll be eligible for green cards immediately. The bill also strengthens the family-based immigration system that has served America so well. The bill includes several provisions from the Reunited Families Act, which I introduced in the past Congress, along with several of my House colleagues. I've always believed that families are the foundation of our society. Las familias son el núcleo de nuestras comunidades. So I'm pleased that this legislation treats spouses and children of green card holders as immediate relatives, so they can immediately reunite with their families. And we eliminate discrimination against LGBTQ plus families. After 3 years, all green card holders are able to pursue naturalization and earn their citizenship. And while it may, to some, be a symbolic change, we remove the word alien from the immigration code and replace it with non-citizen. No longer will we dehumanize the undocumented. This legislation will also grow our economy, strengthen labor protections, and expand access to high-skilled workers. This bill includes many provisions from the POWER Act, my legislation to protect immigrant workers from retaliation for exercising their rights. And American companies will gain greater access to high-skilled workers. We clear out visa backlogs, we end country caps, we capture unused visas and enable more STEM graduates of our universities to stay here and put that knowledge to work for America. After all, we educate these individuals here. Some of them are the brightest people in the world, and then we send them away. No, we will have an opportunity to make sure that they put their knowledge to work for America. Finally, the bill resets our border security policies and restores our commitment to human rights. We will not steal money from our military to spend on a useless wall. We will not hire more border agents for the sake of hiring more border agents. We will not trample on our border communities, and we will not snatch children away from their parents. Instead, we will adopt smarter border controls. We will deploy new technology to help us manage the border, to combat transnational crime, to screen trade, travel, and detect narcotics and other contraband at every point of entry, and port of entry, I should say. And we will address the root causes of migration, particularly from Central America. We know that people do not flee their homes to seek asylum willingly. They are forced to do so and need safety. For many, their choice is to stay or die, or flee and have a chance of living. Stay and see their daughter raped, see their son put into a gang, or flee and take a chance at freedom. As the incoming chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I am incredibly pleased that this bill also includes provisions from the Securing the Northern Triangle Act to improve democratic governance and the rule of law, to fight corruption, to alleviate poverty, and crack down on transnational crime, human rights abuses, and gender-based violence. We also establish refugee processing locations in Central America, and we bring back the Obama administration's Central American Minors Program so that young people in harm's way can apply for asylum abroad instead of making the dangerous journey to the United States. For migrants who do arrive here, the bill improves accountability and training for CBP and ICE officers and develops basic minimum standards of care for individuals and children in custody. And we finally address the shortfalls in our immigration courts that undermine justice for the most vulnerable. Our immigration courts are overburdened and under-resourced. That's why we will hire more immigration judges and personnel and save taxpayer dollars by adopting more humane alternatives to detention, which have been proven to be just as effective. And we will no longer force children to make their own case for asylum on their own. We will give them the assistance to do that. Now, there's a lot more to the legislation, but I hope I have given you a solid glimpse into this bold and forward-leaning bill. Of course, as someone who has been in these battles for nearly 2 decades, I'm under no illusions. I know from my time in the Gang of Eight that passing immigration reform through the Senate particularly is a Herculean task. But in 2013, when we did that, as part of the Gang of Eight, we were told it would never happen. We ended up getting 67 votes for our legislation then, that then went to the House of Representatives, which unfortunately at that time Speaker Boehner never gave the bill a chance of even a vote, and it died in the House of Representatives. You know, we start with a different process. We start with a president who has made this a priority on day one and who I believe will put political capital on the table to make it happen. We start with a majority, albeit slimmer, in the House of Representatives and a speaker who I believe is committed to immigration reform. In the Senate, I'm also humble enough and have the humility to understand and have worked. I have a history of having a bipartisan legacy here in the Senate, of working with many of my Republican colleagues to achieve incredible legislation, from foreign policy initiatives to Alzheimer's, to dealing with those children who have autism, and all of those major initiatives. I've worked with Republican colleagues. I believe that we can do so on immigration reform. Now, the reality is that under the Senate procedures, we will need 60 votes to achieve passage of this legislation. With every Democrat voting for the legislation and Vice President Harris as the president of the Senate voting with us, that gives us 51. That means we will need to find at least 9 Republicans who will join us in this historic effort. Now, we got more than that in 2013. Of course, time and circumstances have changed. Some of those Republican leaders are no longer with us, like the late John McCain or Senator Flake, who joined us in that effort. But I believe hopefully others will be able to step up to the plate. But it's important, I believe, that we start this conversation from a position of strength to advance a bold vision for immigration reform. So let me close by saying to my friends in the business community, we need you to give it everything that you've got. We need you to make it clear through your words and your actions and your dollars that you will not lend your support to politicians or platforms that stoke fear, spread xenophobia, and stymie prospects for reform. To my friends in the advocacy and labor communities, we have our work cut out for us. We must make the case for immigration reform, not just for immigrants and their families, but to Americans of all walks of life. It's time to put political capital and every other capital on the table to make this happen. And when we speak about capital, I think there is a moral imperative. I think there is a national security imperative. But for those who aren't moved by either of those imperatives, let me make the economic imperative. If we looked at the 2013 reform legislation that the Gang of Eight put through the Senate, the CBO economists at that time, those are the congressional budget officers who ultimately, nonpartisan, score everything the Congress does. Does it cost money? Does it save money? Is it revenue neutral? They projected that the 2013 comprehensive immigration reform bill would have reduced the national deficit by $850 billion over 20 years. That it would have grown our economy by nearly $1.5 trillion within a decade, and that it added nearly $300 billion to the Social Security Trust Fund. DACA recipients and their households together pay $5.6 billion in federal taxes each year. TPS holders, who the previous administration would have removed, would have cost the country $45 billion in GDP for a decade. Foreign-born workers contribute roughly $2 trillion to our economy every year. And how about the undocumented workers we found them to be the essential workers, those who risked their lives so that the rest of us could stay at home, as we were told to by our government, to try to break the back of the pandemic, who pick our produce, who pack our meat, who keep our food supplies strong. The immigrants across every industry who may not have had legal status, but nevertheless paid $32 billion in taxes each year, and if given a path to citizenship, would likely add $1.4 trillion to the national GDP. Now, that was 2013. I believe that when it comes time to score these numbers with the new realities, those numbers would even be greater. So throughout our history, immigrants have enlivened our economy. They have unlocked innovation. They have unleashed prosperity, and they have set us apart as the greatest experiment in the history of the world. No other country on earth is as rich a constellation of families who hail from all over the world, but share a thirst for freedom and for opportunity. Immigrants always have and always will be our country's greatest believers in the American dream. I know it because I've lived that dream. I know that my friend, Vice President Harris, has lived that dream. And as I look forward to working with her and President Biden and with my colleagues and all of you to build a 21st century immigration system that keeps the promise of that dream alive for generations to come, that's what compels us to do it. Sí se puede y sí lo vamos a lograr.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that important overview, Senator. Next, we will have questions for you, Senator. One question that we've seen repeatedly in our text box and on social media, we have over 2,000 people that have joined us, is a question about when will we see the text and when it will be introduced. First, I want to bring up the Bishop of Bishop Mario Dornsville, Auxiliary Bishop of the Archdiocese of Washington. Bishop is the chairman of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Migration, to also ask the first question. Bishop?
Thank you, Rebecca. Senator Menendez, it's always a pleasure to listen to you and to be with you. I am a witness of your long-standing for immigrants, as well as I would like to also to recognize former Congressman Luis Gutiérrez. You have been the voice of the voiceless. And your words at this point are kind of what Pope Francis is saying around the whole globe. Let us move from indifference to solidarity. And the way that you humanize the words, you are letting us know that there is no more important point than the human person, his or her dignity, the children, the people who are just the foundation of the future of this nation. On this kind of celebration of life, celebration of faith, and by all means, celebration of hope, I would like to ask you a question. Pope Francis notes that families provide the foundation, an essential building block of our own society. Similarly, family-based immigration is the foundation of our nation's immigration system. Would you please, Senator, explain to us how this legislation will maintain and strengthen family-based immigration while also modernizing our immigration system to realize and to embrace the new migration realities? In other words, how this bill is going to be open to watch over the signs of the times. And as you mentioned in your same words, perhaps 10 years was one reality. After this, 4 years, after these 4 years where we have experienced so much pain in our communities, in our churches, in our dioceses, what's the light and what's the good news that we can spread among our families?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bishop. The Senator will take 2 more questions before answering them. Next, I welcome Angelica Salas, the Executive Director of CHAIRLA.
Good morning, Senator Menendez. Thank you so much. This is an opportunity to say thank you for your decades-long work on behalf of immigrants. Muchas gracias por todo su trabajo, su labor, su amor por nuestras familias inmigrantes, nuestros trabajadores inmigrantes. So my question is to you. You began to talk about strategy and some elements of strategy. From your many years of work, from being really with us in this battle for justice in this country, what are the winning elements? What are the elements of a winning strategy to get immigration reform over the finish line? And connected to that, you talked about political capital. What is the political capital that the Democrats have to use in order for this to become realized? What's the political capital that the Republicans have to use in order for this to become a reality? And once again, thank you so much for everything you have done for our families.
Thank you, Angelica. The third question comes from John Basilisi, the Executive Director of Immigration Policy at the United States Chamber of Commerce. John?
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, Senator Menendez, for being here this morning. I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to your staff, Alice Lugo. She's great. You do a great job hiring people. The question that I have, and it's on the minds of many of our members, is in going through the intel that we have on this bill, it does an awful lot because we have an awful lot of issues that need to be resolved in our immigration system. But it's there is not an awful lot of changes that we see on the future flow of foreign nationals, particularly with regard to temporary workers. And the question I want to ask you is, how do you plan or intend to engage with your colleagues in the Senate on both sides of the aisle to make these changes or incorporate some of these changes into a final product, as it's going to be critical for getting the necessary support to get this through the Senate? And thank you again.
Thank you, John. The last question in this group is from Ms. Rose Dennis, the president of Unite Here, Local 355, Miami. Ms. Rose Dennis? Oh. Ms. Dennis, you have to turn on your camera. Let me start. Oh, there we go.
Good morning. Good morning, Rebecca, and thank you so much for having me. Good morning, Senator. Hello again, my name is Rose Dennis. Thank you to give me the opportunity to talk today. I am a Haitian woman who fled my country 17 years ago and for political persecution. And I've been working with Unite Here for 15 years. And I am today honored and proud to say I am the president of my local 355 of 7,000 hospitality workers, 70% of whom are immigrants like me. Immigrant members form the backbone of Unite Here, a union of about 300,000 workers in the US and Canada. We saw firsthand the disrespect the Trump administration showed towards immigrant communities. So last year, our union made a commitment to work really hard on politics. Over 1,700 of our members and supporters canvassed door-to-door with us in the general election and in the Georgia Senate runoff so we could elect President Biden and Vice President Harris, as well as Senator Warnock and Ossoff. Since the Trump administration took over power 4 years ago, our brothers and sisters who have temporary protected status, including many of them from Haiti, have been living under fears every day. Fears to get deported back home and leaving their children and families behind. Our brothers and sisters work hard and contribute to the economy, and they deserve a pathway to permanent status. My questions for you, Senator: what will the Senate bill introduced by you do to help people with TPS status? And the second part, will they be protected from deportation? Can they apply for citizenship? And thank you again for having me here.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dennis. I will welcome Senator Bob Menendez for your answers.
Thank you all for your questions. There's a lot on the table, so let me see how well I can do in covering it all. First of all, to your eminence, thank you for letting your moral and spiritual voice, as well as many of the faith leaders who have joined us in these efforts in the past. You will be incredibly important collectively as we try to make this happen. On your question about family, this bill reforms the family-based immigration system, and it does so by clearing the backlogs where families are waiting extended periods of time to be reunited. It does that by recapturing past unused visas and by increasing the per country visa cap. It also eliminates something that is called the 3- and 10-year bars, which basically was limitations on who could apply for residency because they were barred from their undocumented entry into the country, and other provisions that keep families apart. The bill also allows immigrants with approved family sponsorship petitions to join family in the United States on a temporary basis while they wait for green cards to become available, something that under the present system cannot happen. So those are just some of the examples of how this dramatically helps and builds upon our history of immigration as a family-based one, but these are significant reforms in that, enhancements to preserving the family as an essential part of our society. To Angelica and the question about what's the winning strategy. Look, it will take all of us, as I made in my opening remarks. It will take all of us. It will take the business community making it very clear that they really want to see immigration reform, that it's not item number 10 in a list of 10 initiatives, that it's up there on one or two. It also will take the business community to make it very clear, as they are saying that this is a priority, that they're not going to allow those who will call any reform amnesty from the get-go and say that that's responsible. I know I have some colleagues that if 10 angels came swearing from above that what I am proposing, what President Biden is proposing, or anybody else is proposing in terms of reform is not amnesty, that they would still say, oh, we don't agree with the 10 angels, it's amnesty. Well, we can never proselytize those individuals. But for those who are open-minded and believe they have ideas about what immigration reform should be, what it looks like, what it should include, this goes a little bit to John's question as well, we have an open door. But we need to have not just the business community, but our faith leadership and our advocacy groups collectively speaking strategically to everyone, all those in the country. We need to make the case to the American people, although in poll after poll we see when the question is raised, we see a majority of Americans in support of reform, but we need to heighten that. We need to strategize and look at these different sectors of the economy that will be helped by reform, and who do they represent? For example, when we talk about farm workers, growers should be big advocates of immigration reform. And most growers happen to be Republican. We need for them to put their effort into the overall reform effort. We need the high-tech community who will benefit from the reforms we are proposing to be an advocate of the overall reform movement. We need those who need the H-1 and 2B visas in the business community to be advocates of overall reform. What we cannot have is only being an advocate for the simple niche that takes care of your economic issue, but doesn't resolve the overall question of the 11 million. When we join together, those and so much more, we can achieve the goal, because then those senators and those members of the House who represent large agricultural interests in their districts and state, those who represent high-tech interests in their state, those who represent some of the critical workers, whether it be in the seafood industry or the meatpacking industry or whatnot, who need that work. When we strategically reach out through them and through faith leaders and through advocacy groups collectively together, I'm reminded what Adlai Stevenson used to say when he said, when I get the heat at home, I see the light in Washington. So we will not have to generate a lot of light and heat at home so that people understand that this is something worthy of putting their capital. Now, you asked me also about capital of the Democrats. using capital here, the president has chosen from day one to put a proposal. We have often complained about both Democratic and Republican presidents in the past that they have only sought to engage in immigration reform, a year or two or later before they started engaging. This is a totally different ball of wax. We will need a president to call in members, to make the case, to hear their views and to embrace some of them. We will need, beyond Democrats, we will need Republicans to come to this with a different spirit, that every legitimate effort for reform is not amnesty. Now, for those who want to use it as a way to pursue their political aspirations, I can't overcome that. But I have an open door, an open mind, and an open hand to anyone who wants to engage in legitimate reform. And I have begun some of those conversations already, including with those who I have worked with on immigration reform in the past, and some because of these different sectors of the economy and whatnot that I think should be open to the idea. And I welcome their ideas, Johns, and that's how we'll deal with that. And finally, with Rose, with reference to TPS, the good news in this legislation is that TPS holders are protected. They will have an expedited path to citizenship as long as they meet all the same criteria of continuing to be, exemplary citizens. Under this bill, TPS holders who meet specific requirements are eligible for green cards immediately. After 3 years, all of those green card holders who pass additional background checks can apply for citizenship. And so that would be tremendously good news for TPS, present TPS recipients, if we were able to pass this law.
Great. Thank you very much, Senator Bob Menendez, for your light and for your heat. The last group of questions with you, and I hope everyone stays on after Senator Menendez has to leave with his Chief Counsel, Alice Lugo. The last two questions for the Senator will be from Rocio Sainz and Ravika. First, I would like to bring up Rocio Sainz, the SEIU Executive Vice President. Rocio?
I hope you can hear me. I'm having a trouble with my video. But let me just start by saying thank you so much for all the work, Senator Menendez. It's just so wonderful to see what is unfolding and to see that elections hopefully really do have consequence. And we're so thrilled that you, Senator Menendez, are going to be leading the fight in the Senate. You have the wisdom and experience that we need in this moment. Our view at SEIU is that our members and our nation desperately need actual relief and sane changes in the law. We're past the time of introducing message bills and being satisfied with that. And for the first time in a long time, we hope and expect to make major progress in this Congress. So my question to you, Senator Menendez, is what is your view in how this will play out in the days and weeks to come? And what is your strategy for getting this bill, or at least key pieces of the bill, to the finish line? And thank you so much again.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sainz. The last question will be from Ms. Ravika Rajkashun, the co-executive director of the New York Immigration Coalition. Ravika?
Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you, Senator Menendez, for being here. And thank you to all of our partners in this work. I'm Ravika Rajkishan. I'm the co-executive director at the New York Immigration Coalition. I myself was formerly undocumented. And because I was able to adjust my status in my 20s, I'm able to be here and do the work that I do fighting for immigrant communities. I'm also part of a mixed status family. So I'm here today as an advocate, but also holding my family's hopes and dreams to be fully accepted here as law-abiding, tax-paying individuals. Thank you, Senator, for speaking to the need to pass this legislation with bipartisan support. I will say that as advocates, our commitment is to do everything we can to get this common sense legislation passed. And as you can see this morning, the movement is very strong. You mentioned that you're having conversations already. Can you share with us how those conversations are going? And what will you do if Republicans come back with increased enforcement as a condition of support? Thank you, and thank you for all of your work.
Okay.
Go ahead, Senator.
Okay. Well, thank you both for your questions. To Rocio, let me just say, when I had discussions with the incoming Biden administration about immigration reform, going back to when the president called me to support him last year, this was one of the first questions that I asked him: how serious are you about immigration reform? And I believe he is very serious. It makes a difference when you have leadership in the White House who will put political capital on the table to try to make things happen. The president has many levers. Whether or not he uses them has been the question in the past. For the most part, they haven't been really used. I believe he will. Of course, the pandemic and the economic consequences that we have suffered as a result of the pandemic are day one issues that affect all of us, and for many of our immigrant communities have disproportionately affected us. But that doesn't mean we can't do other things as well. And I believe this is one of those other things. If I thought that this was just a messaging bill that was going to go absolutely nowhere, then I wouldn't have lent my name to it. I don't have the time to spend on a messaging bill, and I don't want to be a messenger of something that isn't going to happen. Having said that, yes, this will be tough. I'm not Pollyanna about this. I have been in the Congress between the House and the Senate for 29 years. I understand how the process works in both institutions, and it will take a lot of hard work. It will take negotiation as well. This isn't a question, and I believe that's true in the House and the Senate, certainly in the Senate because of our procedural rules that require 60 votes. This isn't a question that I just take what I want and I get the other side to accept it. So let's start all having some degree of reality that there will have to be some negotiations. Now, in that process, we're not going to stray far afield from the very essential priorities and principles that we have outlined in this legislation. But we are open to listening to legitimate offers, concerns, ideas as to what will proselytize others to join us in this effort to achieve the ultimate goal for the greater good. And that's one thing I'll say to all my friends. I have, over the course of 29 years and different initiatives, including immigration reform, I wish that my ideal would be able to be written by me, passed by me, and signed by a president by me. Have a president sign it for me. But along the way, I've always realized, if nothing else, experience has taught me that to get it to 218 votes in the House of Representatives as a minimum, 60 votes in the United States Senate as a minimum, and then a president who will sign it, is a significant undertaking, no matter what the legislation is. And in something as significant as immigration reform, it will take all of those elements. So I simply say we will not stray far apart from our principles and the essence of the legislation, but we will, at the end of the day, have to be open to some negotiation. So I believe that we have a way to get there. We're going to have to do a lot of hard work. And with that hard work, I can't promise you ease. I can't promise you comfort. I can promise you a lot of hard work and sacrifice. And with that, I think we can get to what we all want to see: victory for the country, victory for immigrants in this nation, victory for preserving the very essence of what America has been all about. So thank you very much. I just want to say about the young lady who is going to follow, and I'm doing a lot. She does a lot of the hard work for me. I purloined her from Congressman Gutierrez when she was his chief counsel, and you all know what a tremendous champion has been. She has worked with me as my chief counsel, which is beyond immigration, but that is her passion. She has the knowledge and the drive and the detail that can continue to inform you about what we're trying to achieve here. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you, working with you. We need you. We need you to make this happen.
Great. Thank you so much, Senator. I saw you and Congressman Gutierrez's relentlessness to save my mother, who is now able to save American lives. We will work with you and fight with you and proselytize with you to save millions of mothers and fathers. I'm so honored to bring up Alice Lugo, the Chief Counsel to Senator Menendez. Alice will first just do a deeper dive on the main titles of the federal immigration reform plan. Alice?
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you for having me. Happy to be with you. The Senator's gone through a lot of the details, so I'll do a quick overview and just add a few more. Generally, the key title is the legalization title. As you've all heard, there's going to be a new lawful prospective immigrant status, LPI status, that's offered to the larger undocumented community that was present on January 1st, 2021 in the United States to be eligible. They will be able to obtain LPI status, which is a 6-year status that can be renewable. And after 5 years in that status can apply for a green card, and after 3 years can apply for citizenship. There is an expedited path to green card status for dreamers, TPS holders, and farm workers who will be immediately eligible for LPI status. And after that, citizenship in 3 years. There will also be some waivers available for the presence requirement if there is family unity, humanitarian purpose, or public interest purpose. Also, the bill addresses the managing the border and root causes and getting at what exactly is the push factors to the United States from Central America. So there will be provisions in that space and a smart technology strategy for border. There will also be a reform of the family and employment immigration system, as you've heard. Spouses and children of lawful permanent residents will be treated as immediate relatives, which is significant. Also, the elimination of the 3 and the 10-year bar are included. And another provision of the bill will also address the immigration courts. More judges and personnel are included in the provisions, as well as mandating counsel for children and vulnerable populations, an increase in U visas as well. And finally, the last provision includes many provisions of the POWER Act, which many of you are familiar with, that creates a safe and just workplace and provides protections for immigrant workers, making them eligible for U visas. So that's a very quick overview of the key components of the bill.
Thank you, Alice. Whoops. Okay, I hope that's a little better. I'm just gonna bring up a few common questions that came up, including if you can speak to the family reunification provisions in the bill. Number 2, we have a bunch of growers that are on this conference. They wanted to learn more about the provisions for agriculture and their workers. And then the third question I got are from manufacturers that depend on H-1Bs and H-4s. And if you can speak to some of those provisions. Thank you.
Sure. With regards to the family reunification, spouses and children are included when I speak of this new status, lawful prospective immigrant status. If you have been here and you're the principal applicant, there will be the availability of LPI status for spouses and children as well. And there are certain provisions that will allow for, if spouses and children are abroad, to have an avenue to be able to reunify with family here in the United States, as well as the V visa provision that the senator mentioned earlier about certain family sponsored immigrants to be able to come to the United States and wait for their status here with their family, as well as the expedited treatment of spouses and children of legal permanent residents being treated as immediate relatives. Those are some key family reunification provisions. And with regards to I believe you mentioned H4 provisions, the bill also includes employment authorization for H4s. And as far as the farm worker question, there is an expedited path for farm workers, just like there is an expedited path for TPS holders and dreamers, and that they are eligible, if they meet certain requirements, to apply for a green card immediately.
Great, thank you, Alice. If you can just clarify, sorry, we got another 20 questions right now on this piece about the expedited path for dreamers, TPS farm workers, kind of the path in terms of eligibility for LPI status and citizenship. Yeah, if you could just clarify that one more time.
Sure, not a problem. So there will be an LPI status that is available for the larger undocumented community that was present on January 1st, 2021. And if you meet the requirements for the expedited path as a dreamer, as a TPS holder, as a farm worker, then you are immediately eligible for green card status versus the 5-year LPI status. That is an LPI status that puts you on a path to a green card after 5 years. If you're a TPS holder, a dreamer, a farm worker, then you are immediately eligible for green card status and then can apply for citizenship. So it's a quicker path to citizenship than the larger LPI status. And I apologize, but I have to staff the senator at a noon meeting. So I think I'll have to wrap it up at this point.
Great, thank you so much, Alice. And I know there are hundreds of questions on this chat and also on social media. We will try to get all of them answered when the bill is introduced. Thank you so much for your time, Alice. Thank you so much to Senator Menendez, to Congressman Luis Gutiérrez, and then to all of our co-sponsors for today's webinar. And as the senator said, all of us have to roll up our sleeves and get this to the finish line. But we're hopeful and that we can get this done. Thank you all very, very much and have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for having me.